Jesse Morton is a former jihadist, and he is now co-founder of Parallel Networks, an organization combating hate and extremism, and special advisor to the Counter-Extremism Project. I wanted to bring him in because I wanted to talk about what real hate looks like. It doesn't look like, Ben. Jesse, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much for coming on. I thought your article in the Wall Street Journal, I Invented the Jihad Journal, was shocking and just an amazing piece. Really good job. Could you start by explaining how you became radicalized in the first place?
So I was a young individual who was confused. I grew up exposed to a very countercultural perspective. My father was sort of a beatnik that had moved us to a commune. I grew up with Bob Dylan in the 1960s, countercultural influences, and then I ran away at the age of 16 because my mother's side of the family was very physically abusive. So I was sort of traumatized, and I ran away at 16 to get away from home abuse, gravitated towards actually traveling with the Grateful Dead, and became a very far leftist anarchist before converting to Islam, having found the autobiography of Malcolm X during a few-day stint in jail in State College, Pennsylvania. I became a Muslim who followed Malcolm X more than I followed the actual interpretation of the Prophet Muhammad, gravitated towards a political interpretation of the religion and radical revolutionary interpretation of the religion almost from the beginning. I was taught by a Moroccan veteran of the Afghan-Soviet jihad in Richmond, Virginia, and taught a millenarian perspective of the religion, that the end times was near, that the believers, the Muslims, were in a perpetual war against the non-believers, predominantly the great Satan, that is the United States. And because I felt like my society had not bailed me out of the abuse, and because I had never developed the skills it took to address the underlying traumas that got me radicalized first in sort of tuning in and dropping out, and then secondarily in a fundamentalist interpretation of the Islamic religion, I adopted a very, very serious view that became more and more sympathetic to Osama bin Laden and his adherents in Al-Qaeda over time. So when 9/11 happened, I actually was inclined to support the terrorists and to go against my own country, feeling that it had abandoned me and betrayed me.
Wow, that's an amazing story. Now, talk about you invented this thing called the Jihad Journal, which was actually an innovative attempt to spread the jihad.
Yes, it was. We were very prominent. I ran an organization, so I graduated through the ranks. I actually was getting a master's degree at Columbia University while I was a propagandist, setting the template upon which a large portion of online radicalization ensued. My organization, Revolution Muslim, located in New York City, was responsible for 15 terrorist plots, or connected to 15 terrorist plots in the end. We ran until 2011 when Osama was killed in Abbottabad. And basically what we did was we realized very quickly that as the threat we perceived was not so much from people that were trained abroad by Al-Qaeda, but one that was homegrown. The domestic lone wolf attack was what we were beginning to be more concerned with. And the leadership in Al-Qaeda was basically saying that what we should do is project the message, their message, through social media in particular. What we did was, rather than just convey their message, we conveyed it in an American way. It almost was Al-Qaeda on Madison Avenue, if you will. And one of the ways that we were most innovative was in conjunction with other prominent propagandists such as Samir Khan and Anwar al-Awlaki, two American individuals that were later killed in a drone strike in Yemen after joining Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. We started an English-language online e-zine that was very, very glossy, full of very good graphic design. I wrote the lead article for the first issue, and we collaborated on making it appeal to the American or the Western mindset. Unfortunately, I've changed my beliefs now, but that template went on after my organization threatened the writers of South Park for portraying the Prophet Muhammad. That template was launched by Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula as its own outlet called Inspire. And Inspire had an article in it that was called How to Bake a Bomb in Mom's Kitchen. That's the recipe that's been utilized in innumerable texts thereafter, and the most successful example of that was the Boston Marathon bombers, who in 2013, while I was already incarcerated and was changing my ways, I had to see the consequences of that recipe come to fruition when the Tsarnaev brothers killed 2 and injured hundreds more at the Boston Marathon finish line. Since that day, and before that, but particularly that day, sets forth a motion of me trying to make amends for the damage that I have caused. And now I work, interestingly enough, alongside of the director of intelligence of the NYPD that used to monitor me for several years of my life, and we work to combat the hate and extremism that I once espoused.
Well, let me go back for just a minute to the Jihad Journal. When you were trying to incite people to make lone wolf attacks, What kinds of things did you tell them? How do you inspire someone to do that?
Well, I mean, it's a combination of mixing the theological or the religious and the fundamentalist religious interpretations with the political. So a lot of what you see in the language of ISIS and Al-Qaeda is not strictly religious. It is religion. It's a political grievance, and it's a revolutionary political grievance. It's almost like taking, far leftism and replicating it in a manner where it doesn't call for a socialist utopia. What it calls for is a transnational caliphate that is a utopia from the past that never actually existed. And so when you can transform religious rhetoric into idealistic narratives about current events and the great Satan and the American imperialist in the Middle East, what you can do is you can mobilize people to go against their own society. We're talking predominantly, second, third generation Muslims from immigrant countries where their parents came here and they grew up here. They're totally enmeshed in the American society, but for whatever reason, they feel like they're drawn to an identity from their ethnic background. Or you're talking converts who tend to be the most zealous, but also misinformed. So it's really not so much a religious argument, but there's a very crafty way which the propagandists can make it seem like it's spiritual and religious, because it's a comprehensive worldview and a comprehensive culture. And for those that are most susceptible to radical ideas, they love to see the world in a black and white worldview. And so we use three primary principles that take a long time to go through in suggesting first that God is the only one that can provide legislation. So democracy, the concept of man-made legislation, is actually a form of idolatry. And then there's this idea that you have to hate and reject everyone that practices any form of legislation other than the one that, quote-unquote, God has revealed to Muhammad in the Quran and in the narrations attributed to the Prophet Muhammad. And then there's this idea that when you can synthesize the two of them, you're actually practicing monotheism in its complete form. And so a Muslim that doesn't believe in the Islamic State is not actually a Muslim at all. So not only are you hating the non-believer, you're also hating the believers that disagree with you. So basically it's just a global hate movement that's dedicated towards reestablishing some pristine past that never actually existed.
And
long story short.
When you were arrested, what were you charged with?
So I had threatened the writer. I had a cohort. His name was Zachary Chesser. He was a kid from an affluent background, Fairfax County, Virginia, radicalized in like 6 months through direct contact with Anwar al-Awlaki, who was a very prominent preacher that still is connected to most terrorist attacks we see today. And the South Park writers said that they were going to portray the Prophet Muhammad in a bear costume. We issued a death threat against the South Park writers because we knew that it would create the kind of publicity we needed to get coverage in the mainstream press, but a small segment of those that witnessed that coverage would adhere to our views. It was basically free marketing. And in the process of trying to exploit that situation, we clearly entered the realm of illegal speech. So what was radical revolutionary speech where we knew we were consciously walking up to the line of the First Amendment, putting our middle fingers in the air, so to say, and then carefully trekking back. We had gotten away with that for many years. The South Park threat crossed that threshold. I knew that it did. I fled to Morocco, and it was there that I was extracted from the movement, and suddenly the Arab Spring broke out, and I had exposure to Arab millennial youth, found that they really desired a lot of the things I had taken for granted, and then, went to a series of processes where we started to sort of reverse course. I was arrested for inciting the murder of the South Park creators and conspiring in the production of Inspire magazine with Samir Khan and Anwar al-Awlaki, the magazine that went on to birth ISIS's own English language iterations, Dabith and Rumiyah, which have been calling not just for the pipe bomb attacks, but now for mowing people down in the streets.
Amazing. So tell me now, what are you doing now? So you've changed. You're working with the police who came after you. How are you? What is the journal you're working on now?
So we are starting an organization called Parallel Networks. Parallel Networks is basically believing that rather than as you suggest, outlawing speech, we should develop networks that rival in size and scope the networks that we believe to be extremist, jihadists being a clear-cut example of them, that only networks can battle networks. And so we're formulating a cadre of people that have left extremist movements. We have an organization and a website called lightuponlight.online. It has a 24/7 call-in number. We can provide support to individuals that want to leave movements. We publish counter speech. And one of the most interesting things that we recently did was we published a replication of the English language jihadi magazines I started. That's where the op-ed in the Wall Street Journal comes from. It looks exactly like ISIS's own production. We spent 10 days in the secret chat rooms of ISIS adherents, letting them know that a new magazine was coming, to the point where they were promoting our magazine for us. And so that when we launched that op-ed, the magazine product that we created was being disseminated without any knowledge of ISIS supporters. So now we're picking them apart inside of their own communities in encrypted platforms. They've migrated away from Facebook. They've migrated away from Twitter. Now they're on an application called Telegram, and we're in there dissecting that movement, trying to marginalize the voices in that movement that are promoting ISIS. So this is one of the things we do. We provide counsel and support to individuals that are coming home with terrorism-related offenses to protect them from society. We do an array of things, go around and speak about my experiences with the NYPD Director of Intelligence and Officer Mitch Silber that now works with me, share our stories, train individuals that might be responsible for forwarding attempts at terrorist attacks, get a better understanding of this phenomenon. But most importantly, we promote dialogue and engagement rather than polarization and hate and hatred of the other. So we're only a year and a couple months old. We're developing rapidly. We're very happy with what things are moving forward. We have a great support system and counter-extremism project, which works diligently to make sure that Facebook is held accountable for its negligence in removing extremist content, that Twitter is held accountable, and social media platforms are held accountable for their removing particular levels of speech. We come in and we clear up the process by providing the services on the ground that can help individuals change and that can then combat these networks with other networks that rival them in size and scope, but that are built on, pro-democratic, post-Enlightenment interpretations of religion that are very effective in pulling people out of their support for groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda.
Where can people find out more about you, Jesse? You have a website or something?
Lightuponlight.online is our core hub, or pnetworks.org is where we house our marketing and our main organization. But our activity is hosted on lightuponlight.online. It's a website where we have an array of programs and initiatives, and they can contact us there. We'll be glad to answer any questions that they have or provide consultation in any needs that services they might desire.
Jesse Morton, thanks very much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
I do appreciate you having me. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks. Speech combating speech. And, if you can't tell the difference between a guy telling people to kill people and Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin, if you can't tell the difference between what hate really sounds like, to the point that they're threatening people's lives, and people who are supporting the Constitution and want people to be free and want babies not to be killed, if you can't tell that difference, you have lost the plot of America. You have lost the plot of the West. You've lost the plot of freedom. They mean to do it. The silencing people is just makes them stronger. I love that line about battling networks with networks.